March 12th, 2026. Netanyahu couldn't finish his sentence. Air raid sirens drowned him out mid-word. What he admitted seconds before those alarms screamed across central Israel is what neither Washington or Jerusalem wanted you to hear. I'm Kenzo Shimada, and I've spent 13 days tracking every missile launch, every interceptor failure, every official statement from both sides. What I found buried in Netanyahu's first press conference contradicts everything we were told about this war. And once you see it, the entire operation starts to crack open. 13 days ago, I watched the opening strikes light up the night sky over Thrawn. The IDF called it overwhelming force. American officials said Iran's missile capabilities were 70% destroyed within 72 hours. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was dead. The message was clear. Mission accomplished, enemy crippled, war nearly over. I didn't believe it then. I believe it even less now. Because while Netanyahu was standing in front of cameras on March 12th telling the world Israel is a global superpower, Iran fired its 6th ballistic missile salvo of that single day. The sirens went off while he was still speaking. He could not hide from it. None of them can hide from it anymore. Here's what happened in that press conference that every analyst I know is still dissecting. Netanyahu said Iran had been burying its missile and nuclear infrastructure deep underground. He said if Israel hadn't acted when it did, within months those weapons would have become immune to any attack. That word, immune. I replayed that section 4 times to make sure I heard it correctly. That is not the language of a leader describing an enemy he has already beaten. That is a leader explaining why the enemy is still shooting back 13 days into a campaign that was supposed to be swift and decisive. He told Fox News on day 4, this would be quick and decisive. It has been neither. I've analyzed hundreds of conflicts. I know what victory language sounds like. This is not it. This is damage control dressed up as strategy. Let me show you the numbers that don't lie. On March 12th alone, 6 separate Iranian ballistic missile salvos struck Israeli territory. Hezbollah launched over 200 rockets from Lebanon in what the IDF itself described as a coordinated joint operation. A missile hit a home in Haniel. A rocket struck a house in Baina, wounding civilians. Schools across the entire country remain closed. Israel is operating under a national state of emergency 2 weeks into a war that was sold as a rapid decapitation strike. The deadliest event landed days earlier in Beit Shemesh, 18 miles from Jerusalem. An Iranian ballistic missile hit a communal shelter inside a synagogue. 9 people were killed, dozens wounded. 2 Israeli interceptors were fired at that incoming warhead. Both missed. I need you to understand what that means. The entire Israeli civil defense model depends on 3 things working in sequence: early detection, timely alerts, functional intercepts. At Beit Shemesh, all 3 failed simultaneously. The sirens did not activate in time to give residents the standard 90-second warning. When the interceptors miss and the sirens lag, the shelter is not protection. It is a trap. I've spent years studying air defense architectures. This is not a marginal glitch. This is a structural exposure in the very foundation Israel has built its survival doctrine around. But here's the part that should alarm every strategist watching this unfold. Netanyahu admitted on camera that he cannot guarantee the Iranian regime will fall. A journalist asked him directly whether he could promise that outcome. He said he cannot promise 100% that the regime will collapse without the Iranian people themselves rising up. He told Iranians directly, help is on the way, but at the end of the day, it is up to you. Think about what that means. The man directing a multi-billion-dollar military campaign, the man whose forces killed the supreme leader in a targeted strike, is publicly stating that the operation by itself cannot deliver the stated political objective. Regime change, the entire justification for this war, depends on Iranian civilians taking to the streets. Now hold that statement against what American intelligence has been telling the White House for weeks. A classified report by the National Intelligence Council, completed before the first bomb even dropped, concluded that neither limited airstrikes nor a prolonged military campaign would likely result in regime change in Iran. That assessment was written in February 2026. Since then, multiple follow-up intelligence analyses have reached the same conclusion. Sources describe a multitude of reports, all providing consistent findings. The regime is not in danger and retains control of the Iranian public. A senior Israeli official privately acknowledged to Reuters that there is no certainty the war will lead to the collapse of the clerical government. And here is what makes this contradiction lethal. Iran did not fracture after Khamenei was killed. The assembly of experts convened within days and selected Mojtaba Khamenei, the dead leader's son, as the new supreme leader. Analysts describe him as more hardline than his father. His first statement as supreme leader was read aloud on state television. He did not appear on camera, which raises obvious questions about where he is and how secure he feels physically. But the substance of the statement was defiant. He vowed to avenge Iranian blood and declared the Strait of Hormuz would remain a tool of pressure against the West. The regime did not collapse. It promoted from within. It issued commands. It kept launching missiles. 13 days into the most expensive military campaign since the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the government is still standing, the missiles are still flying, and no one on any side has defined what a realistic ending looks like. I watched Netanyahu's face when a reporter reminded him of something he said 2 years ago. In 2024, he told the Israeli public that military strikes had set Hezbollah back 20 years. The reporter asked the obvious question: if that was true, how is Hezbollah currently firing 200 rockets a day into Israel? Netanyahu did not answer directly. He reframed. He said the original threat projections were catastrophic. Towers falling in Tel Aviv, 20,000 Israelis dead, cities leveled. None of that happened, he argued, because Israel struck preemptively. But then he said something that undercuts his entire position. He admitted on the record that Hezbollah continues to be capable of attacking us. That is a sitting prime minister conceding that a force he publicly declared neutralized 2 years ago is conducting sustained offensive operations against his country right now. The ground reality confirms it. On March 12th, the IDF carried out strikes on Hezbollah positions in central Beirut, outside the traditional Dahiya stronghold. Israeli ground forces pushed deeper into southern Lebanon. Defense Minister Israel Katz warned the Lebanese government that Israel is prepared to widen ground operations and ordered civilians south of the Litani River to evacuate. Senior defense officials warned privately that Hezbollah still holds a large inventory of launchers and intends to grind the IDF down over time. Israel is locked in a two-front war with no clear endpoint for either theater. Now let me show you the number that connects everything. The Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed for nearly 2 weeks. The IRGC declared that not a single liter of oil would pass through and threatened to set ablaze any vessel attempting the crossing. Since February 28th, at least 16 separate attacks on commercial ships have been documented. 8 seafarers are dead. 1 is missing. Roughly 150 vessels are stranded. Iran planted about a dozen naval mines in the waterway. Brent crude shot from $73 per barrel before the war to over $113 within the first 10 days. American gasoline prices climbed 17% since the conflict began. The International Energy Agency announced that its 32 member nations would collectively release 400 million barrels from emergency reserves, the largest coordinated drawdown in the IEA's history. The IRGC's public message was blunt: expect oil at $200 a barrel. The Pentagon confirmed to the Senate Armed Services Committee that the first 6 days alone cost over $11.3 billion. That makes this the most expensive American military engagement since the opening phase of the Iraq invasion. Iran struck Gulf states indiscriminately. Saudi Arabia intercepted 12 drones on March 12th. The UAE stopped 10 missiles and 26 drones the same day. Qatar shut down LNG production at its 2 largest facilities after Iranian strikes hit the installations directly. European natural gas futures jumped 30% after Qatar went offline. At least 7 American service members have been killed across the region. Iran launched retaliatory strikes on at least 27 different locations hosting U.S. military personnel. The civilian toll inside Iran is devastating. The Iranian Red Crescent reported nearly 800 killed. Human rights organizations say the actual number exceeds 2,400. Iran's deputy health minister stated that 31 major hospitals have been damaged and 12 are completely non-functional. In Lebanon, 687 people have been killed, 98 of them children. And through all of this destruction, the political payoff Netanyahu expected has not arrived. A poll released during his press conference showed him losing seats in projected election outcomes. He launched this conflict partly as a political calculation ahead of Israeli elections that could come as early as June or July. That is not materializing. His corruption trial continues. Israel's Pardons Department completed a formal review of his pardon request and found it does not meet legal criteria. Donald Trump publicly called Israeli President Isaac Herzog weak, pathetic, and a disgrace for not issuing that pardon. Netanyahu refused to push back. He said the president can say whatever he wants. But Trump has also told reporters he wants this war finished soon. Netanyahu needs the conflict to extend long enough to avoid the courtroom and reach election day from a position of strength. Their strategic clocks are running in opposite directions. I've been documenting conflicts for over a decade. I know what momentum looks like. I know what stalemate looks like. And I know what defeat disguised as progress looks like. This is the third one. 13 days into a campaign designed to topple a government, that government is still issuing orders. 13 days into an operation meant to neutralize Iran's missile threat. 6 salvos landed in a single day. 13 days into strikes that supposedly destroyed 70% of Iran's launch capability, interceptors are missing their targets, and Sirens are failing to activate in time. The stated objective was regime change. The regime promoted from within and kept firing. No one steering this war has defined what victory actually means anymore, because the gap between what they promised and what they delivered is now too wide to explain away. Netanyahu held his first press conference on a Zoom call while incoming missiles sent his own population underground. That image is the entire war in one frame. And that frame is frozen now, stuck between what was promised and what actually happened, with no exit visible on either side. The question is not whether either side wins. The question is how long both keep pretending they can.